Move.
You don't just stand around doing nothing. Principal Harold Thompson's voice thundered through the cold morning air as he stepped into the school parking lot. His eyes were already narrowed, his jaw clenched from the heated email he'd read just minutes earlier about budget errors in the cafeteria's quarterly report. He scanned the lot and then fixed his gaze on a woman standing near the front entrance. She was wearing a gray wool coat, nothing fancy. No badge. No clipboard. No uniform. She held a slim brown folder and stared at the school building as if she were evaluating it. To Thompson, she didn't belong there.
Not standing like that. Not looking like that.
Not on a Monday. He didn't ask who she was.
He didn't need to.
He'd already decided. You one of the janitors? He barked, marching closer. You're late. Get inside and start your shift or get out of the way. This isn't a place for loitering. The woman turned toward him slowly. Her face was calm, composed, like a still lake. Her hand tightened on the folder, but she said nothing. A group of students had just walked past, laughing among themselves, but now they stopped. One of them instinctively pulled out his phone. Thompson didn't notice. No response? Is that how we're doing things now? Just standing here like statues? Christ. He spun around, walked back into the building, grabbed a plastic cup, filled it with water from the cooler in the front office, and came back outside, all while mumbling insults under his breath. The front office receptionist, a meek woman in her late 30s, looked up nervously but said nothing. She never did. He walked right up to the woman and, with a satisfied grunt, splashed the cup of cold water straight into her face.
There, he snapped.
That should wake you up. Now either go clean something or get off school property. The splash echoed in the stunned silence that followed. The students gasped audibly. One girl covered her mouth. A senior football player took a step forward, hesitated, and then stayed frozen. The woman's face was wet, water dripping down her cheeks and chin, soaking the edge of her collar. Still, she didn't blink. She slowly took a tissue from her coat pocket, dabbed at her face, looked directly at Thompson and said, in a voice so calm it chilled the air around her, "Mr. Thompson, you have no idea who I am." Her words landed like a slap. But he didn't react.
Not yet.
Not fully. He scoffed, turned away from her, and walked back inside. These people, he muttered under his breath. Always playing victim. Always causing a scene. The hallway was still. Students moved quickly, quietly. They always did when Thompson was angry. He liked to patrol the halls like a storm cloud, unpredictable and loaded with fury. Get to class. He barked at a kid with headphones. You think this is a mall? The kid flinched and rushed off. The receptionist at the front desk stood as he passed. Sir, she said carefully, do you know who that woman was? Don't care, he snapped. Probably someone from facilities. Lazy, entitled, standing there like, she owns the place. She opened her mouth again but closed it. She knew better. But then the silence shifted. Outside, a black government vehicle pulled into the staff parking lot. Another followed. Thompson glanced out the window, and his stomach dropped. It wasn't just the make of the car, it was the seal on the door. The district office. He watched as the passenger door opened, and a woman in a sharp navy coat stepped out. Tall, composed, in her 50s, with confidence etched into every line of her face. Beside her, walking calmly, still drying her face, was the same woman he'd thrown water on. Only now, she was flanked by two individuals holding briefcases. Auditors. Inspectors. Thompson's mind raced. No, this had to be a mistake. He turned to the receptionist, who looked back at him, pale. Mr. Thompson, I think that's Dr. Maya Henderson. Dr. Maya Henderson, superintendent of the entire Lakewood School District. And if the resemblance was right, if he squinted past the water on her coat, the woman beside her was her sister. Danielle Henderson, civil rights attorney, investigator, specialist in educational discrimination. He didn't move. For the first time in years, Thompson didn't know what to do.
He didn't speak.
He didn't bark orders. He just stood, rooted, sweating, as the doors to Ridgewood High opened for the women he had humiliated, and for the reckoning he never saw coming. The doors to Ridgewood High hissed open with a mechanical reluctance, as if the building itself sensed the weight of what was walking through it. Danielle Henderson stepped inside first, no longer the silent observer from moments before, but now fully seen, dignified, calm, unshaken. Maya Henderson followed, clipboard in hand, her eyes sweeping across the lobby with quiet authority. Behind them came the two auditors, their expressions unreadable, professional, clinical. Thompson stood frozen in the hallway. His mind whirred like an old machine struggling to turn on. Every instinct he'd honed over the years, to dominate, to deflect, to bark until people obeyed, rose to the surface. But none of them worked. Not with Maya's gaze now locked onto his, not with Danielle's standing by her side, water still drying in the seams of her coat, not saying a word. "Principal Thompson," Maya began, her voice clear and controlled, "I assume you're aware of why we're here." His mouth opened, then closed again. He forced a nod, swallowing hard. "District audit, yes."
I
wasn't told it would begin this morning." "That was intentional," she replied. "We conduct surprise assessments to prevent performance staging. What we're interested in is your school on a normal day." Her emphasis on the word normal made the blood drain from his face. He nodded again, slower this time. "Of course. You'll want to speak to the staff." Maya didn't answer. She turned slightly, looking at Danielle. "Before we meet with your team, we'd like to request use of the conference room."
Sure.
"Yes, of course." Thompson gestured with his hand, almost too eagerly. "Right this way." The walk down the hallway was the longest of his career. Every footstep echoed against the tiled floor. Students watched from classroom doors. Teachers glanced up from desks. Whispers rippled behind them. Phones buzzed in pockets. Inside the conference room, Danielle finally spoke. Her voice was level, professional. "I'd like to make a statement for the record before we begin." Thompson shifted in his seat across the table. He could feel sweat collecting at the back of his neck. "Of course," Maya said. She clicked her pen and nodded toward one of the auditors, who began typing. Danielle opened her folder, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and laid it flat on the table. At approximately 7:53 a.m., I arrived on Ridgewood High School grounds and stood near the front entrance to observe morning student flow as part of our ongoing analysis of administrative environment. Within 5 minutes, Principal Harold Thompson confronted me without introduction or inquiry, demanded I go clean something, and upon my silence, retrieved a cup of water and threw it in my face. In full view of multiple students and staff. The auditor's fingers clacked steadily over the keyboard. Thompson's jaw tensed. I thought you were. That's the point." Danielle cut in sharply, without raising her voice. "You didn't think. You assumed. Based on what? My clothes? My skin? My silence." Maya remained quiet.
Danielle continued.
"This isn't just about water. It's about the culture you've cultivated here. A culture where belittlement is routine, where authority is misused, and where prejudice goes unchecked." Thompson shifted again. "I admit I was rude," he said, fumbling for footing. "I was under stress. There were emails this morning, staff shortages. We're not here for your excuses," Maya said coldly. "We're here to evaluate the integrity of this institution. And so far, the leadership is failing." For the first time, Thompson's face cracked. Not visibly, but internally something faltered. His posture softened, eyes flicking to the floor. "I've been here 22 years, he muttered. "I've held this school together. You think it's easy? These kids, these parents. We know exactly how long you've been here," Danielle interrupted. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "We also know how many complaints have been filed under your name. Informal and formal. Verbal abuse. Excessive punishment. Discriminatory language. Those were all reviewed," he protested. "And dismissed. Lack of evidence. Or lack of courage from those under your authority," Maya added. Funny how power protects itself. Outside the room, the atmosphere in Ridgewood was shifting. News of the incident spread like electricity. Students watched and shared the video, Thompson throwing water on the woman, without even knowing who she was. Teachers whispered behind closed doors. A science teacher, Mr. Barnes, leaned against the wall in the staff lounge and said quietly, "He finally messed with the wrong one." Miss Peterson, from the English department, nodded solemnly. "Took long enough." "They gonna fire him?" asked the gym coach. "Or cover it up like last time?" "Not with her involved," Miss Peterson said, glancing at a paused video on her phone. "She's not here for show. This is real." Back in the conference room, Maya set down her pen. "We'll be conducting interviews with your faculty and staff over the next 2 days. You will not interfere, and you will not attempt to sway testimony." "I'd never," Thompson began. "Principal Thompson," Maya said, standing. "At this point, we are no longer speaking to you as a peer. You're under review. You may speak when asked." Danielle stood too, quietly, folding her folder under her arm. "And one more thing," she said. "You really don't remember me, do you?" Thompson blinked.
What?
Danielle tilted her head, studying him. 1996, sophomore year. "You were the vice principal then. There was an incident in the library. I was blamed for vandalism I didn't commit. You refused to listen. You had me suspended. And when I protested, you called me aggressive and told my parents that girls like me needed to be disciplined early." The room went silent.
Not a sound.
Just the ticking of a cheap plastic wall clock. Thompson stared at her, stunned. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. You were a student here?" Danielle gave a small, sad smile. "And you haven't changed." Then she turned and walked out of the room. The door shut behind them with a sharp click. Thompson sat back in the chair, shoulders heavy. The conference room, once a place of strategy and control for him, now felt like a cell. For the first time, Harold Thompson understood something fundamental. Power doesn't protect you forever. Not when the past walks back through the front door, cold water dripping from its chin, and demands to be seen. The next 24 hours at Ridgewood High unfolded like the slow detonation of a bomb. Word of the incident spread beyond the school walls, first through student group chats, then through a local Facebook post, and finally onto the news blog of a small but persistent education watchdog website. By noon the following day, the headline read, "District Superintendent witnesses principal assault civil rights attorney during surprise audit." The comments poured in. "About time someone called him out. I went to Ridgewood. This man traumatized my brother. My daughter said he yelled at her for hugging her friend in the hallway. Fired now or fired later." Inside the school, the tension was suffocating. Thompson walked the halls like a ghost. He didn't raise his voice. He barely spoke. Some staff assumed it was the calm before a legal storm, that he was preparing a lawsuit or orchestrating a PR response. But others, those who had truly known him, recognized something different. Fear. Real fear. The kind a man feels when the fortress he built is cracking at the foundation. That morning, Maya and Danielle returned with a full team. Their presence was no longer just administrative, it was transformational. Teachers were interviewed privately. Students were asked to describe the school environment without fear of repercussion. They spoke. Oh, how they spoke. Stories emerged like rising smoke from long-smothered fires. Freshman girls told of being disciplined for speaking out in class, while boys who disrupted were given warnings. A black sophomore described being called too loud by Thompson and given detention for laughing in the lunchroom. A white student recalled hearing Thompson refer to another kid as not Ridgewood material and being afraid to ask what that meant. A chemistry teacher revealed that her syllabus had been edited without permission after she included a unit on social justice in science history. Another confessed to being pressured into giving a student detention for insubordination when all she did was ask why she got a lower grade than her white classmates on a group project. Piece by piece, the picture came together. And yet, even as it did, Thompson clung to a sliver of denial. In his mind, he was still the man who had saved Ridgewood from mediocrity. He had kept discipline, structure, real education. He sat in his office, staring out the window, remembering assemblies he led, policies he wrote, performances he judged. It wasn't pride, it was delusion. And it cracked completely when Danielle asked to meet him again. He was in the main office, standing behind the front desk, speaking quietly to the secretary. When Danielle entered, the air shifted again. He looked up, immediately tense. "Ms. Henderson," he said stiffly. "You've made your point." She studied him for a moment, then asked, "Do you remember calling me violent?" His brows pulled together. "What?" "You said I needed to be disciplined early. That I was a danger to other students. That I had attitude problems." Thompson's mouth opened slightly. His eyes flicked to the secretary, then back. "That was, if that happened, it was a long time ago. I was following protocols." "There were no protocols," Danielle said calmly. "There was just you, a white man in a position of power, and a 15-year-old girl who questioned why black students were being pulled out of AP classes and placed into remedial ones without consent." "I don't recall that," he said. "I'm sure you don't," she replied. "You didn't have to. For you, it was just another day." She walked past him, standing in the center of the office. "For me, it changed everything. I was labeled. My GPA dropped. I lost scholarships. My parents had to pull me out and homeschool me for a year just to protect my mental health." Thompson said nothing. His face was stone, but his hands trembled slightly. Danielle turned slowly toward him. "You shaped this place in your image, Harold, and it's been rotting from the inside ever since." "I built order," he snapped suddenly. "Before me, Ridgewood was chaos. I enforced standards, rules, respect." "You enforced fear," Danielle shot back. "Fear isn't respect. It's silence. And you silenced an entire generation of students who deserved better." He looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment his face cracked, not from anger or pride, but from something else. Recognition. Regret. Maybe both. "You could have said something," he muttered. "Back then. You could have told someone." "I did," she said. No one listened. She walked closer to him now, slowly, the way someone walks toward a mirror they haven't looked into in years. "You don't know what it's like to walk into a building where you were made to feel small, powerless, disposable. But I came back anyway, because someone had to hold you accountable, and because the students who are here now, they still have a chance to be heard." Thompson looked down at the floor. His voice, when it came, was barely audible. "I didn't recognize you." Danielle nodded. "That's what makes it worse." And with that, she turned and left the office. Outside, students were changing classes. Bells rang, lockers slammed, sneakers squeaked across linoleum floors. Life moved on, but something in the building had shifted. Permanently. A senior named Trevor, the one who recorded the water incident, watched Danielle walk down the hall and whisper to his friend, "She's like a real-life superhero." "Nah," the friend replied. "She's justice." Behind the glass office window, Harold Thompson sat down. Not at his desk. Not on the high-backed chair he usually reserved for guests, but on the edge of a bench near the wall, head in his hands. For the first time in decades, he felt what it was like to be small. Not because someone made him feel that way, but because the truth finally reached him. And there was nowhere left to hide. By Thursday morning, Ridgewood High no longer felt like Ridgewood High. The building looked the same from the outside, brick walls, flagpole, the usual stream of buses, but inside, the atmosphere had changed completely. Thompson's voice, once a constant fixture in the halls, had vanished. His name was no longer spoken with fear but with caution, like an echo of a past no one wanted to resurrect too soon. The district's investigation expanded quickly. The temporary administrative team set up in the library, repurposed as a makeshift operations center, began reviewing student files, disciplinary records, and staff evaluations. The numbers didn't lie. Disciplinary actions were disproportionately issued to students of color. Attendance warnings were handed out unevenly. Patterns of favoritism emerged. Reports that had once been misplaced or lost in transition resurfaced in digital backups and paper archives. Teachers who had suffered in silence for years now came forward. One by one, they spoke to Danielle, Maya, and the auditors. Ms. Peterson, the English teacher, revealed how she had been scolded in private for assigning literature written by Black authors during Black History Month because Thompson claimed it was too politically charged. Mr. Barnes confessed he'd been reprimanded for refusing to send a student to detention over disrespect, which was nothing more than a raised eyebrow when Thompson interrupted class. Others cried as they talked. Relief and guilt intermingled in their voices. They had watched injustice unfold, but had felt powerless to act. Danielle listened to each of them, without judgment. She wrote notes, asked questions, made eye contact. She was building something, not just a case, but a bridge. Something lasting. Something no one could tear down when she left. Meanwhile, Thompson remained in his office. Though technically still in his position, his authority had been fully stripped. A district-appointed administrator monitored all activity. His email was suspended. His calendar cleared. The man who had once dictated every schedule, every punishment, every hallway protocol, now sat in silence behind closed doors. Occasionally, he stared at the wall where his framed Educator of the Year award still hung crooked. He hadn't touched it. He didn't dare. On Friday, the district held a closed-door staff meeting. Danielle stood before the full Ridgewood faculty, not in a suit this time, but in a dark blue sweater and slacks, comfortable, approachable. She introduced herself formally, then spoke with measured honesty. "I came here thinking this was going to be just another audit," she began. "But when I stepped onto this campus, I realized something else. I realized that this wasn't about policy. It was about people, about patterns that have gone unchecked. About a culture that protected the wrong voices and punished the right ones." The room was silent. "We can't undo the damage overnight," she continued. "But we can face it. And we can stop pretending that silence is neutrality. It isn't. Silence is complicity. And Ridgewood has been quiet for far too long." Some teachers nodded. Others looked away. A few wiped tears. Maya stepped forward then. Effective immediately, Principal Harold Thompson has been placed on administrative leave pending termination proceedings. An interim principal will be appointed Monday. The room exhaled. Slowly, deeply. No one cheered. No one clapped. But the release was palpable, like a storm lifting after too many seasons of gray. Outside the meeting, students noticed the change. Hallways were quieter, but the tension had shifted. It wasn't fear now. It was uncertainty. A cautious kind of hope. Trevor, the student who filmed the water incident, was called to speak with the district team. He walked into the library nervously but came out lighter, seen. His video had become evidence, yes, but more than that, it had become a moment of truth no one could ignore. That afternoon, Danielle visited an old classroom. Room 114. The room where she had once been pulled out by Thompson, accused of vandalism she hadn't committed. She stood there for a long time, alone, letting the quiet settle around her. She could still hear the echo of her 15-year-old self, confused, angry, ashamed. But now, she wasn't ashamed. She was standing exactly where she was meant to, not as a victim but as a witness, a survivor, a woman who came back. Later that evening, Danielle and Maya sat together on a bench outside the school, watching the sun dip behind the Colorado mountains. Maya sipped coffee from a paper cup, glancing sideways at her sister. "I know this was personal," she said softly.
Danielle nodded.
"It had to be." Maya was quiet for a moment. "You sure you don't want to take the interim principal role? We'd back you. The board would too." Danielle smiled faintly. "That's not where I belong. I did what I came here to do." "Which was what?" Maya asked. Danielle looked out at the fading sky. "Make sure no girl like me ever walks out of this building feeling less than she is." Inside the building, Thompson packed his things. The photos came down first, his family, the district ceremonies, a photo with the mayor. He stared at the frame of his first day as principal. He looked younger, hungrier, maybe even hopeful.
He didn't know when it had changed.
When the pride turned to arrogance. When the discipline became control. When the rules he enforced became walls no one else could break through. As he closed his last box, he glanced at his desk. There, untouched, was a printout of Danielle's initial report, the one he never read, assuming it was just paperwork. He picked it up now, scanning the first paragraph. And for a fleeting moment, he understood what it meant to be on the other side of history. Not as the author, but as the cautionary tale. As the man who had everything, until 2 minutes of thoughtless cruelty brought it all down. And in the quiet of his empty office, for the first time, he didn't deny it. The first snow of December fell gently over Lakewood the following week, covering the streets and school rooftops with a thin white layer that softened everything it touched. Ridgewood High stood quietly under the morning light, a building in transition, not just physically, but in its spirit.
Inside, the air felt different.
The loudspeakers, once filled with rigid morning announcements from Principal Thompson, now offered soft reminders and student-led segments. Bulletin boards that used to display only rules and rankings now showed artwork, student essays, and messages of inclusion. In the cafeteria, a poster read, "Your voice belongs here." It hadn't been printed by a staff member. It was handwritten by a student. Danielle returned once more, quietly unannounced. She didn't come to inspect or audit. She just walked the halls. Some students recognized her. A few whispered. One girl, maybe 14, with thick curly hair and nervous eyes, stopped her near the main stairwell. "Are you the woman from the video?" Danielle smiled. "I am." The girl hesitated. Then she said, "Thank you. I didn't know adults could stand up for us like that." Danielle's smile softened. "We don't always know either," she said. "But we can learn." Outside, Maya watched from the parking lot, leaning against her car, hands in her coat pockets. She had just left a meeting with the school board. Tense, but productive. Policies were shifting. Funding was being redirected. Bias training would be implemented. Not just as a one-time session, but as a structured part of professional development. None of this had existed a month ago. But now, the wheels were moving. Inside the building, the interim principal, Ms. Alvarez, walked with a new energy. Young, Latina, and respected by staff, she moved with purpose, consulting students by name, asking about their ideas, their concerns. One student had suggested a peer-led discussion group about race and identity. She'd approved it instantly. Ridgewood was still Ridgewood.
The walls hadn't changed,
but the way people felt walking through them had. And that was everything. As for Harold Thompson, his name was removed from the staff list by the end of the week. The board's decision had been unanimous. He hadn't appealed. He gave no farewell speech. He left quietly, without ceremony. And while some community members defended him, citing his years of service, most understood the truth. Leadership is not about control. It's about care. And Harold had forgotten that long ago. Back at home, Danielle closed the last page of her written report. She saved it, exhaled, and leaned back in her chair. On the wall beside her desk was a photo of her younger self, age 15, in a school hoodie, smiling tightly in a yearbook portrait. A version of her that never imagined one day she'd walk back into that same school and rewrite the ending. Not out of revenge, but out of purpose. Out of necessity. Because silence only protects the powerful. And telling the truth, even when it shakes the walls, is the beginning of justice. So, maybe Ridgewood would never be perfect. But for the first time, it had a chance. A real one. And that was enough. Thank you for listening to this story all the way to the end. It means a lot.